What's going on, friends? With the weather heating up outside and summer and riding season really getting into full swing here, it really got me to thinking of one way that the twin cam engine actually triumphed over the Evolution engine. Yes, I know, that's kind of hard to hear and really kind of hard to think about, but there is one way that the twin cam engine really got one over on the good, reliable Evolution engine. The twin cam engine was designed with the future and expansion in mind, and also it was designed in a way to improve upon a lot of the areas that the Evolution engine really struggled and had some issues. Now with the summer heat coming, one thing really comes to mind. The twin cam engine was designed to have larger cylinders and larger cylinder heads. Not only that, they had more fins on it, and not only more fins, they were actually bigger, which increased the cooling surface area. Now while this is great for the engine, for us at riders, well, that's kind of a different story. Guys, please don't forget, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. The twin cam engine was designed with the future in mind, and with that future in mind, one of the biggest improvements they made over the Evolution engine was definitely to the cooling system. It was a lot better for the motor, and also arguably one could say with the added power, it really did make the engines last a bit longer. Now with more power going into the twin cam engine and the increased cooling surface area, as a rider, you definitely felt more heat. Now we'll go into that a little later in the video because it really kind of does trade one problem for another, but in a lot of ways, the benefits really kind of outweighed the costs. Now that increased cooling surface area, that also solved another issue that the Evolution motor had, and that was the cylinder spacing. It was very narrow. Now this cylinder spacing really wasn't an issue with a stock motorcycle. It really wasn't even an issue when you got into putting exhaust on it, jet kit, air cleaner, maybe even a camshaft. But when you really started to hop the Evolution engine up, started trying to squeeze more power out of it with the stock cases, this is where the issue really started to rear its ugly head. Now when guys started adding big bore kits and putting more compression into the engines, the cylinder studs would actually pull out of the cases. Now this was a big issue, and number one, naturally everybody wanted to go out and replace it with some higher quality studs. That's something that's a little stronger than the factory. Well, the issue wasn't actually the studs themselves. It could have been blamed on the cases because there wasn't a lot of meat there, but essentially at the end of the day, it was the cylinder head stud spacing, and there just wasn't enough meat there on those cases with that narrow spacing to actually hold those studs in the cases properly. And even in the worst case scenario, the stock Evolution cases, they might actually split. Now with the twin cam having the larger cylinders on it, this increased that footprint on the cases. That allowed them to actually use a little bit bigger studs. It got a much better hold in the cases. So this completely eliminated the issue of the cylinder studs pulling out of the cases. But at the same time, also that wider footprint that allowed for bigger, larger, and more cooling fins, which actually helped shed heat on the motor much more efficiently. And by doing this with that wider footprint on the cases for the cylinders, this also solved another issue that the Evolution engine had. And this was that really kind of hard and wonky pushrod angle. Now that pushrod angle on the Evolution engine, even with a stock cam, you could really only bet you're going to get 40,000 miles out of the set of lifters just because that angle is so hard on them. And if you happen to have a performance cam in your Evolution engine, you might even not even make it to 40,000 miles on a set of lifters before you have one starting to make noise on you. Another thing that Harley-Davidson did with the twin cam engine is they actually cast the lifter blocks into the cases themselves. Love it or hate it, I'm kind of on the fence about it because changing out gaskets and O-rings, not a huge deal for me, but it was a leak point on the Evolution engine having the removable and serviceable lifter blocks. Was it kind of a pain in the butt when they did leak? Yes. Was it ever really a big deal? Not really. But as far as the twin cam engine goes, by casting the lifter blocks actually into the cases, they solved the problem of the leaks. That really wasn't an issue anymore. What became an issue is later on down the road, eventually those lifter bores do wear out. But fortunately the aftermarket stepped up, and we do have different sizes of lifters that you can put in there to try and get a little tighter fit. But essentially, when it comes to those lifter bores, there's really nothing else you could do other than put a bigger lifter in them as they wear out over time. Now, the way the twin cam engine was designed, as I mentioned, it was really designed with the future in mind. Harley-Davidson planned on keeping this engine around for a while, and they knew they couldn't sit idle like they did with the Evo. Eventually, they were going to have to continue to increase power and keep building on that, and they wanted to do it on the same platform. That's why everything about the twin cam engine was designed for expansion in the future. Now, the original twin cam 88, when it came out with the carburetor minus the cam chain tensioner issue, really wasn't a bad motor. It was a really, really good motor. And from there, we watched it evolve to a 95, to a 96. We saw the 103. Then came the 110. And there is a displacement out there that you may not see very often on a twin cam. I know I've seen very little of them, and that is a 117 conversion through Screamin Eagle. Now, Harley-Davidson had that for the 110 engine, but you don't see a lot of them. And the reason why I feel like you don't see a lot of those is by the time you bought that kit and had it installed, you could just swap that whole engine out for a 120R. And a 120R produced arguably about the same amount of power, if not more, but you had a fresh engine, fresh bottom end, and the 120R actually had a lot of the Screamin Eagle goodies in it. In fact, it had just about all of them in it. So for the cost difference of upgrading a 110 to a 117, it really did make more sense just to buy a fresh 120R engine and swap out your 110 rather than converting it to a 117. Now, as I mentioned, the twin cam engine having a much better cooling system and the rider feeling more heat, this became very apparent in 2007 when they went to fuel injection. It wasn't really a big issue on the twin cam 88 with the carburetor because they weren't running as lean. But in 2007, that's when they really had to lean the bikes out. And this is probably something that was really, the twin cam was not really designed to handle running that lean all the time. And that's why it got so much flack and had so many complaints, because with a stock tune on one of those, it'll dang near melt you. Now, in the original design of the twin cam 88, Harley-Davidson, the engineers actually called for an oil cooler, but Styling didn't want to have that. Styling didn't even want to get away from the Evo cylinder head and fin design on the cylinders. They didn't want to get away from that because it sold and everybody loved it, and that's what worked. But engineering knew with putting more power into this engine, obviously they had to get more heat out. So the big compromise was going with the larger cylinders with more fins and larger cooling surface area. Now, it is never a bad idea to put an aftermarket oil cooler on your Harley-Davidson, especially coming in the summer months. And if you ride in a very extreme climate, well, anything about over 90 degrees, you're really going to want that oil cooler, especially if you're going to be riding in a lot of traffic. If you ride in a city area, getting one with a fan assist, that really isn't a bad idea either. But honestly, at the end of the day, when it comes to an air-cooled motor, the best way to cool it is to be running down the road, but we all know that's not possible at all times. Now, honestly, I don't believe the twin cam engine will ever take the place of the Evolution motor. That engine was just too simple and too reliable. But the twin cam engine did have a lot of really nice improvements over the Evolution engine. Wouldn't it have been nice to build on that Evo platform just the way they did? I would have loved to have seen that. But with emissions and trying to get more power out and still remain emissions compliant, they basically had to get a brand new fresh motor. And that's kind of how we ended up with the twin cams and 2 valves. Guys, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with the twin cam engine. I know it's not quite as held as one of the best engines like the Evolution was, but there is a lot you could do with them and a lot you could do on the stock cases. You could get some crazy displacements on them. You could do all kinds of internal engine work and still have actually a very reliable engine. Even that Screamin Eagle 120R, there's a lot of guys that put those in touring bikes and took them all over the U.S. But that just kind of goes to show, even with the press cranks, the roller bearing bottom ends, and using a good cam plate in them, these bikes can actually be very, very reliable machines. As reliable as the Evo? I don't know. That's going to be kind of up to you guys to decide, because there's guys that have had trouble with Evos, and there's guys that have had zero problems with twin cam engines. So guys, the twin cam did have some nice improvements over the Evo, but at the same time, a lot of things were changed. There's a lot of new technology and engineering that went into these bikes that honestly wasn't the greatest in the world, and I'm not going to dive into that when it comes to twin cam in this video. I'm pretty sure by now you guys are very well aware of some of the teething issues that the twin cam had. But anyhow, guys, let me know in the comments, what do you think? Do you think the twin cam's a reliable engine? Do you think that they actually made some improvements over the Evo on it, or was it just an absolute complete disaster? I kind of want to get your thoughts on that. But anyhow, guys, that's all I've got for you this week. If you guys enjoyed the video, please don't forget to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. But until next week, guys, you stay safe on the streets, ride smart, dodge those cars, and I'll catch you guys back here next week with a brand new video. Thanks for watching.